Arundel.
All right, fellas, our first team in the Atlantic here, alphabetically, is we're going to go with here, is the Boston Bruins. They added not a lot of people here, nothing significant anyway, and they lost Haula, and as of right now, they still haven't re-signed Bergeron, so we're putting him on the lost list right here, and it's C's all across the board here, fellas. So, Jake, let's come over to you. Why do you give him a C?
I think the team's going downhill. There's rumors that Bergeron's coming back. He did text, I believe it was Pavel Zacha when he got traded in. He said, welcome to the team, did that kind of thing. So it sounds like Bergeron's coming back. Plus, they want to get Krejci back. But even then, did they really gain at all? I don't think so. They're going to be the same team that is continuing that downward trend.
Mm-hmm. Matt, did you give a C for similar reasons here?
Yeah, I think it really depends on them bringing back Bergeron. I think it's a C if they can end up bringing him back and bringing back his leadership. If not, I think it's probably an F because they really haven't done anything. But yeah, it really depends on Bergeron. Even so, it's not that great.
Yeah, so pretty much they didn't get better. They kind of got worse as of right now, but we'll see with the Bergeron situation. So that one's a little bit up in the air. C's across the board for Boston. Next, we have your Stanley Cup contender, Buffalo Sabres, who added nobody practically. And they lost a good list of people here, including Arundel, Butcher, Miller, and, a couple other assets as well here. So I gave him a C+, particularly because I think that they're finally doing what they need to do and let the young guys play, let them develop, and see who you want to build around. All right, Jake, you gave him a D. Matt, you gave him an F. Jake, we'll come over to you here. What did you not like about their free agency?
So the only thing that they added is Ben Bishop's contract, which Ben Bishop heard that he got traded to Buffalo and started crying when he knew full well he wasn't playing anyways. But I do think that they are doing what they need to do, which is why they didn't get an F. They need to get rid of everybody and let the young guys play, but they also need to start drafting right. And so far, it's kind of on the fence. Rasmus Dahlin wasn't that superstar that he should have been, at least not yet. Hopefully the pieces start coming together.
Matt, similar thoughts here for Buffalo?
Yeah, I just have 3 words to say. Arundel.
Amen, brother. All right. Next up, we have the Detroit Red Wings. And Jake, you gave him an A+. I gave him an A-. Matt gave him a C+ here. They added a whole bunch of people. Copp, Kubalik, Perron, Sherratt, Husso, Mata. Solid acquisitions. They only lost Grice, Stahl, and I don't even know about that guy. I don't even know who he is. But anyways, Jake, you gave him an A+. Obviously, you loved what Yzerman's doing over here. What do you love particularly?
So I think as far as did this team get better, did this team get worse? They added an entire forward line. They added a defensive pair. They added a goalie, probably their starting goalie if Nedeljkovic doesn't get his act together or keep developing like they want him to. But the thing about this is they're kind of like the Toronto of America right now, where it's like every free agent, it's like they're going to Detroit. They're going to Detroit. Like even like Klingberg, I heard was going to Detroit. Like it seems like every free agent, like Kadri might be going to Detroit. I think there's got to be a limit to how much they can spend, but the rumor mill has everyone going to Detroit, and you know what? Their team is better for it. So,
Matt, and you gave him a C+ here. Was there a particular move that you did not like to prevent them giving them like an A or a B?
I think maybe just the Perron signing, like we've said before in the past, and like I've said before in the past. I think a guy kind of stunning the growth. As much as people like to disagree with us in the comments section, I think stunning the growth of their young forwards is something that I did not like, and I thought that moving them down the order doesn't make much sense to me. But other than that, they did add some pretty good depth, and that's why I kept it a pretty decent grade. And they're definitely going to be better this year.
Some people think that their young guys are going to still play top line minutes, and Perron will be on the second line. Matt, do you think that's true, or do you think he's going to play first line?
When you're giving a guy close to $5 million, you're probably expecting him to play a good amount of the season, especially coming off the season he had in St. Louis. It's not like he comes off of a really good year in St. Louis, and they're going to be like, okay, you're going to play third pair line. That's not going to happen. This guy's going to play. He's going to play a lot because he's proven compared to those younger guys. So that's just how it's going to be with a lot of these veteran coaches. That's what they like to do. So.
Yep. All right. So moving on to the Florida Panthers here. They added Tkachuk, obviously, in the big trade. They also got Del Zotto, and they lost Giroux, Sherratt, Uyghur, and Huberdeau. So the list of their loss section here is pretty significant. Jake, you gave them a C minus. Matt and I gave them an F. Jake, how come a C minus here?
So I think that Matthew Tkachuk is a great player, but this was a playoff team that honestly they got upset. They lost to Tampa in the second round. I believe they got swept, which isn't what you want to see. But this team won the President's Trophy, and I think a little more experience is what they got out of this season. They should have just run it back next year, and instead they blew it up and they started over. And I think we look at another team like Vegas, who just traded for Jack Eichel, and how did that work out? He wasn't a fit. He didn't produce like they thought he would. Granted, he is still recovering from an injury, but I think that it's a dangerous thing to happen, is to shake up your core like that.
Yeah, and Matt, you gave him an F here. Obviously, you hated what they did. So kind of explain to us why.
I just thought it made no sense to me. As much as the guys that they brought out were on one-year deals, you're downgrading at wing and you're giving up more assets to do that. And then they didn't even bring anything to – it kind of seems like they kind of bit the bullet, as you could kind of say. Like, I agree with Jake. It seems a lot like what Vegas did, where they saw the shiny prize in Matthew Tkachuk, and they're like, oh, man, we got to get this guy no matter what. So they ended up just saying, you know what? Whatever you want, we'll give it to you. And they just gave up way too much. A guy like Jonathan Huberdeau, who's been a 100-point player twice already in his career, one of the top forwards in the league, and you're giving him up for a guy who, yeah, is coming off a 100-point season himself, but again, is still only 24 years old. So you're really expecting him to give you that 100-point season, especially in a new system with new centers that he's got to play with, new wingers he's got to play with. Just doesn't make much sense to me, and it's way too much to give up.
And I believe this is his first time ever being point per game.
Yeah.
Yep. For the same reasons, Matt, I gave him an F. I don't understand why you make big changes when you had massive success. Just because you lost in the playoffs doesn't mean your team has to be significantly changed. Go and, you might lose a couple of guys, but fill in some pieces there. I wouldn't have even traded Huberdeau for Tkachuk, and some people might think I'm stupid for that, but I don't really care. Huberdeau is an amazing player. And him and Barkov's chemistry was just unreal. And now you're shaking that up. And to throw in a first-round pick, too, like that, I don't even know what Florida is trying to do.
And a top pair defenseman.
Yeah, and a top pair defenseman. So not exactly sure what Florida's doing there, but I personally don't like it. If you're a Florida fan and you like it, great, I'm happy for you. But if I were a Florida fan, I'd be pretty ticked off. But anyways, moving on to the Montreal Canadiens, who obviously had the first overall pick this year, but they added Dadonov and Doc. They lost Pitlick, Paquette, and Romanov. Looks like we gave them C's all across the board here. Jake, we'll come over to you.
So I gave him a C, pretty much an average off season. They added Doc, which I think is a good move. I know you guys haven't really been on the Doc bandwagon because he didn't really produce in Chicago, but I think that it's a move they needed to make. They have a future second line center, and so they're building for that core that they have with Caulfield and Suzuki that's going to be fantastic in a few years from now. But right now, I think that they could have given up a little more. Why is Carey Price still on the team? Maybe they can't find a suitor. Maybe he's going to retire, but if they do, I don't know. I just think I'd like to see them get rid of more, sell a little bit, try to get Connor Bedard on the team.
Yeah, Matt, you also gave a C here. What are your thoughts on their offseason?
I just thought it was kind of just like one step forward, one step back kind of thing. It was like, yeah, you bring in a guy who, as much as I don't like him, Kirby Dach, he's still a young player, and he's going to maybe in a change of scenery, he's going to do well and do good things. But the one guy that I did not like that they got rid of was Alexander Romanov. I thought he was a guy that could really gel well with their D, and he was really young defenseman. I thought he could be a guy who could be here for 7 to 8 years if you just gave him the time of day and gave him the minutes to do that. And they kind of just seemed like they gave up on him way too early just to move on and get a guy like Kirby Dach. And for that, I just think, I don't know, it's just they're kind of treading water here, and it looks like maybe looking to get a top draft pick and jump into the sweepstakes next year, like Jake said, for Bedard. But yeah, it's a little weird. And yeah, I guess we'll see what direction they're going when the season moves on.
One thing about Romanov, is what he had going for him is he played with Shea Weber. So he got some of that veteran leadership. You can't remake that. Shea Weber's gone. I think his contract is in Vegas, actually. So, you're not going to get that back. So hopefully you have some other young defenders that can pick it up naturally.
Yeah, and for the same reasons there, I didn't like the Romanov move. I just didn't get it. You have young guys like Caulfield, Suzuki. I thought Romanov was going to be that D-man for them moving forward, and then they just said, nah, we'll move on. And so I just didn't get it, and so yeah, that's why I gave them a C as well. So moving on to a team who made probably the biggest splash in free agency, that would be the Ottawa Senators. Ottawa added Alex DeBrincat, Cam Talbot, and obviously just recently Claude Giroux. They lost Delzato, Gustafson, Gaudet, and Murray. So Jake, you gave him an A+. I gave him an A+. Matt, you gave him a B here. So Jake, let's come over to you. You obviously loved what they did.
These were my Stanley Cup favorites before they added DeBrincat. So now that they added DeBrincat, they're unstoppable. Then they go out and they replace Matt Murray with Cam Talbot, who was legendary last season. He was an all-star. Minnesota had no reason. They had no reason to replace the man. He was so good. They bring in Fleury, and guess what? You lost in the first round because that's what Fleury does. You should have kept Talbot. And then they add Giroux on top of that. This team is a powerhouse now. The rumors had it that their owner, Eugene Melnyk, didn't really like him to spend money. And all of a sudden, he's out, rip. But they turn this entire team around. They add a bunch of star players. They're getting a new arena. They're spending money, and the team is good. And if you're an Ottawa fan, you should be excited. I'm not even an Ottawa fan, and I'm excited.
Yeah, Matt and I are over here casually crying because of the Alex DeBrincat situation, but it's okay. You guys got a solid.
I thought you were going to say you were crying because the owner died, but my bad.
Alex DeBrincat, though. All right, Matt. So gave him a B here, and some Ottawa fans might be like, "What the heck, dude?" So, how come you gave him a B?
I don't know. I think it was as much as people are going off about the Claude Giroux signing, 3 years kind of seems a little steep to me. As crazy as that sounds, he's a guy who looked really good. Yeah, he looked really good first there in Florida, but I think we'll see with that long of a contract at that price what that's going to do. But he's still going to be a good player, I think, for this year and maybe next year. The big underlining thing that I thought was really good that they did this year, and it was a guy we were talking about in the Ottawa video, was bringing back Josh Norris, getting him back on that extension, the 8x8, which I think for a number one center is a steal. The fact that you're only getting him for $8 million for the next 8 years is just crazy. That's a really good contract. He's a number one center coming off a crazy good year, and now he's got a star winger on the wing with him, unfortunately, in our case, but great for theirs. It's just going to make his play even better this year. So, yeah, this only going up for this team got to be high grade. Maybe not the greatest grade, but I think they're going to be really good this year.
Yeah, no doubt they're going to be a really good team, and that's honestly why I hated Florida's moves even more. Because Ottawa and Detroit made huge moves, and then Florida, I don't know. But anyway, conversation for another day. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning. This team has obviously been stellar for the past who knows how many seasons. Seems like forever. But they added Ian Cole, Nemestikov, and Fleury, and they lost McDonough, Nash, Palat, and Ruda. A pretty decent chunk of players to lose, especially considering who they brought in to replace them. Jake, you gave him a C. Matt, you also gave him a C, and I gave him a D. So, Jake, looks like you gave him pretty average grade here. How come?
So the thing about it is Boston, I talked about how they've just been on this decline, how they're trying to hold the pieces together, and they're still just kind of getting worse year by year. Tampa's doing the same thing. Last year, they lost players like Gord. This year, they lost McDonough. They lost Palat and Ruda, who played on their penalty kill. And I just think that their decline is happening much faster than even they expected. But that's what happens when you win back-to-back cups. Players get more money than maybe they should. But it's Tampa, so they're going to end up in the Stanley Cup final no matter what. They could play their AHL roster. They're going to get to the final just because it's Tampa.
Matt, you also gave him a C. Do you agree with Jake here?
Yeah, I think they kind of rolled eights this off season and decided to shove that out to every single young player that there was on the roster. And Yeah, 8-year deals all the way around. It's a crazy offseason when it comes to that. Giving that long a term to multiple players is crazy. The big thing that kind of stung me, and I think we talked about in the past, was the Sergachev contract. I just thought for a defensive defenseman, that is a steep number for a guy that's probably never going to give you north of 50 points to get $8.5 million a year for the next 8 years. Which I like the term, obviously, but the amount of money, that's just insane for a defensive defenseman. And the rest of the contracts are kind of okay. It's kind of the same thing with Chernak, same thing, just 5.5 for a dude who's probably never going to do the same thing. And that was kind of the big thing for me. And that's why it was kind of a meh off season. But like Jake said, we'll probably be laughed at later in the year when they're in the Stanley Cup again. So.
Yeah. Obviously, guys, I gave him a little bit of a worse grade than you guys did. I don't understand how you bring these, guys in like Cole and Nemestikov, and you just let Palat go. I thought Palat was amazing for them, especially in the playoffs. I thought that he was a piece that had to stay. I know that McDonough, with cap and everything, people had to be moved. I don't know. I just think Tampa took a pretty significant step back. Obviously, they're going to be a great team, but compared to what they were, I just didn't like the route that they decided to go with here.
Yeah, and Palat, I think, is somebody who would have taken a pay cut to stay with Tampa because he's just that loyal to the team. Meanwhile, they bring in Ian Cole, who's so against loyalty, he cheated on his wife. So,
classic. All right, fellas. All right. Our final team here is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we're not going to bring up the first round, still an open wound. But let's go over who they added and lost. They added Ben, Samsonov, Gaudette, Crow, Murray, Abe Kubel, and they lost Mrazek and Campbell, Mikheyev, and a couple others. So Jake, you gave him a B plus. I gave him a C. Matt, you gave him a B minus. Jake, come over to you first since you gave him the best grade.
So I think that they added a lot of good pieces with what they had to work with. I know they're tight against the cap, but that's what happens when you pay 3 guys each north of $10 million contracts. But the pieces they added are good. Samsonov is not a starting goalie though, and Murray is definitely not a starting goalie. So I don't know what they're doing there. I think that Edmonton made the right approach where they added a goalie, and Toronto got rid of their goalie. So I don't know what the strategy is there, but all of the depth pieces that they added, like Yarncroc, is solid.
Yeah, I do like some of the depth pieces that they added. I think the goaltender situation is really what threw me off. You bring in a guy like Matt Murray because you're tied against you get rid of Jack Campbell because you're quote unquote tied against the cap. Then you bring in a guy like Matt Murray. Jack Campbell played absolutely amazing for you, and you just let him go to Edmonton on a 5-by-5.
And he was a fan favorite.
Yeah, not great. Matt, you gave him a B minus here, which is a little right in between me and Jake. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just thought they must have a crap ton of faith in their goaltender coach because they brought in the project and Jack Campbell that he wasn't really a mainstay starter when he first came in as per se, but like you said in the past, he was a starting or a low starter when he came into Toronto and obviously got to new heights here and then ended up leaving. And they think they can do the same thing with a guy like Samsonov because I think Matt Murray has already passed. But I think they're probably thinking Samsonov is probably their future starter there, and they're going to try to move along with him and hope Matt Murray can give them some decent years. There's no way he's giving them anywhere close to what he did in Pittsburgh, but they're just hoping that he stays steady for him. And I mean, I will say I gave him a B minus because I thought getting off the Peter Mrazek contract was a big thing. Again, heart right in the stomach to us is it seems like our Chicago's offseason has been terrible, but that's another story entirely. But they were able to get off that contract, and that's a lot of money that they were able to save up. Kind of weird that they in the way they use that money, but they did save up a little bit, and I think that's kind of what the big thing was for them this offseason is just setting up because, as we know, that Auston Matthews contract is lurking next season. So that's something they're going to be gearing up and ready for. So this offseason was kind of just making sure they filled any holes that they had to do. So
with the goalie situation, with Campbell, the fans would chant "soup." With Murray, instead they're going to be chanting, "Use your glove for the love of God."
All right, fellas. Any other comments regarding any of these teams that we just talked about for free agency?
Well, I will ask both of you. Who do you think made the most improvements?
Matt, would you want to go first here?
Had to been Canada's nation's capital there. They're kind of living up to their name of being the top of all there in Canada. So, yeah, gotta be Ottawa.
Yep, I agree. I was going to say Ottawa as well. When it comes to looking at who they lost and who they brought in big names around the league, and they didn't give up a whole lot to do it. I mean, they got DeBrincat at an absolute steal. The Hawks just gave him away. So, again, us Hawks fans are crying ourselves to sleep every night about this. But yeah, Ottawa for sure. I mean, that team deserves to be good again, especially after these moves this free agency.
Yeah, the thing about that, fellas, you can't spell Ottawa without a W. You can't spell Blackhawk without an L. Ignore the W in Blackhawk.
Okay,
they will this season as well.
Okay. All right, fellas. So on that note, if you guys are still with us, let us know what you think of our free agency grades and drop yours down in the comments below, and we'll talk hockey with you. We'll see you next time on Winamac Hockey.